Hey folks, welcome to a special live edition of Gamer Logic Live, and today we are actually taking a look at the Retron 5 from Hyperkin. This is set to release on a total US scale on June 6th, and I happened to get my hands on a unit semi-early and figured while I'm going through this thing, you guys can kind of experience it too. I know with a lot of hype that is on this machine and a lot of missed promises from Hyperkin. Some people are pretty upset with the company, and other people aren't really sure about this thing if it's going to be worth the money, especially because there was a price increase on it. I figured I'd show you guys kind of my live perspective of exactly what I think about this thing as I'm going through it. And yeah, I did have maybe about a half hour of time myself just to plug it in, make sure it worked, and try a couple of games on there. So we'll just talk about some of the things on the system, and then we'll eventually get into some games as well. And right off the bat here, we're going to talk about the box itself. It's just a box, nothing special. Little funky shape on the top, but gets the job done. Shows the product, shows what's included. Let's get to the important factor, and that is the system here. And it's a pretty decent size system. Let's see if we can turn this thing over without turning everything off on it, because that would suck. There we go. So what the system is, if you're completely unfamiliar with it, is it's a clone-based system that'll play a number of different games. Starting with the very front, you can do Famicom games. After that, you can do NES games, Nintendo Entertainment System, SNES or Super Famicom games in this slot, and then Genesis games. Now, one of the new additions to these clone systems is the fact that it can actually play a Game Boy Advance cart, which I believe the slot is right here. So you're actually able to play GBA games, regular Game Boy games, Game Boy Color games, all of that stuff, all on one system. The great thing about this is on the back end of the machine, I'll try to turn this over for you guys here, this is a straight out HDMI system. It is meant for HD TVs. So unlike the other clone systems out there that only use, say, AS video or a composite video out, this actually allows you to interface directly with your HD TV and have a high resolution without the need of a video upscaler. HDMI port here. Here is your actual power connector for the AC adapter. One of my first complaints about this thing is the AC adapter power cord is kind of short, unfortunately. And then you have a USB cable that runs to a different size USB cable that actually will charge your controller. Otherwise, the controller itself is in fact wireless, and it's Bluetooth and sits nicely on the back end here. So let's turn this thing back around. On the sides here, and this is on the other side as well, you'll have a Super Nintendo slot for Super Nintendo controller, an NES slot for an NES controller, as well as a Genesis slot. So you're not stuck with this controller, which I can see in future play sessions just based off of what I've played on this controller. There's going to be a lot of times where I'm going to prefer playing on the original actual controllers, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But pretty much what you see here is what you get, and it's a decent size system. I was a little shocked at the size of it when I actually received it and saw it. I don't know if it's a little bigger than what I originally saw at Midwest Gaming Classic, or maybe my memory is just escaping me, but it is a decent size system for all it offers. So you do need a little bit of room in your entertainment center if you're putting it one, of course, for being able to get your cartridges in, as well as being able to get it in lengthwise. Now, when you start the system up, you obviously hold the power button, system boots, and you're going to run into the user interface there, and you're on your way, and we'll cover the user interface in a little bit. But let's talk a little bit about the controller. I've covered a few things about it. It's rechargeable with the USB cable, no external batteries, which may be a plus or a minus, depending on how you feel about things recharging. I know sometimes I freak out about things getting charged over and over and over again, and eventually it won't work. You can play the thing plugged into the actual USB charger though, so I guess if that ever did happen, you can at least use the USB. Controller wise, you got all sorts of buttons. You have your regular shoulder buttons here on the left and right, which you would use for the Super Nintendo. You actually have two buttons here, which these are function buttons from what I understand. You can actually do screenshots. You can assign a shortcut to do screenshots here. This one will actually fast forward gameplay, which is pretty crazy. Then you have your standard 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 button set up here if you want to do a 6-button Genesis. Or if you prefer, if you don't like using the shoulder buttons for, say, Street Fighter 2, you can actually remap the L and R to these functions if you're playing the SNES version of Street Fighter 2, which is kind of nice. Some people prefer that. As far as the joystick goes, on that subject of Street Fighter 2, it is a clicky joystick. So it's kind of similar to the Neo Geo Pocket, or the Neo Geo controller that came with the Neo Geo CD had a clicky joystick like that. With my 30-minute experience with this thing on the clicky joystick, I noticed a little discrepancies. Street Fighter 2 didn't control super well. I play as Ryu or Ken mostly in Street Fighters, and I found that the original gamepad was way more accurate than this joypad. Another complaint, I should say joystick, another complaint, Castlevania 3, when Trevor is walking, normally, if I'm remembering correctly, on like a regular NES controller, you could just hold up and diagonal whatever direction you're going in, and usually he would automatically cling to the stairs. With this, I tend to notice that if I'm holding it in the far upper left or the far upper right, he just skips the stairs. And if you're not really paying attention visually, if you're just going by the feel of the controls, you're going to fall off a ledge, you're going to miss the staircase. So I'll have to come back to that and see if that's actually the case. Maybe it was always like that on the NES and I'm just not remembering it. But it was something I noticed as weird. Other than that, as far as comfort on the controller itself, it's okay. For RPGs and stuff like that, where you don't need to worry about a wire, I think it'll do okay. It's a little bit bulky. Especially on the bottom end kind of digs into your hands a little bit. And, I'm not trying to downput the controller, because in terms of responsiveness, for the most part, it's probably the best wireless controller I've ever played with on a console, or at least a retro console. But I think purists are going to want to be able to use the original hardware a lot more with the controllers compared to this, and if that's the case, well, you have the option for that, so not too much to worry about that. And the back, you maybe notice that I have a 512 megabyte SD card in there. You can use that to upload the cheat database, as well as using a function to store screenshots and stuff, which I was messing just a little bit with. And it seems like a really nice function for reviewers, even if you're not doing the live streams. Like, for example, I'm doing right now. If I just want to do some screenshots, and I happen to be downstairs, I can just go ahead and take a couple screenshots, pull the SD card out, pop them into my computer, and I'm good to go. And makes things really easy there. I won't have to be tied to this room in order to capture things. So that's pretty much kind of the physical shell of the system in overall theory. As far as complaints, again, I've really addressed my complaints with the controller itself. Otherwise, overall, the only other complaint I have about this thing is it feels cheap. And what I mean by that is when you're putting a cartridge in, it almost feels like if you put too much pressure on it that something's going to snap in it, or the plastic's going to snap. I also had some issues with getting the cartridges out, and that's always been the case with clone systems. But for this, it worries me because it just feels cheaper than the other systems, and I'm worried about breaking stuff. But you really have to wiggle the cartridge out to the left and then to the right, and then hopefully it comes out. It just feels really tight in there, and it feels like you could totally break something. The only cartridges that come out really easy, at least in my experience, was the Famicom carts. They go in easy, they come out easy. I don't know if that's because it's shaped differently. Maybe the plastic on the cartridges are holding tight on all the other stuff. But that's... Other than that, that's pretty much it. Really quick, the lights here will define what system you're plugged in with. It'll also define when the controller is synced up. Kind of neat there. Why don't we jump into the actual user interface for this thing, and I'll explain some stuff there. Okay, so this is the actual interface to the Retron 5 itself. I believe this is based off of Android. And right now it's asking me, are you bored with me? No, I'm not. So you can have it pop these messages up, or you can tell it, don't show me again. When you boot the system up, and you're not going to see this on this video because I already went through and showed this, but it'll allow you to sync up the controller the first time. It'll tell you to hold the home button down for a number of seconds. And then after that, it'll actually define what your screen size is so it can be properly bordered across the edges of your screen. That way you're not cutting stuff off, all that good stuff. So you have a couple options here right from the get-go. You can choose play, you can choose game menu, settings. Plus button will get you in things. If there's nothing in there, then it's obviously not going to work. Go into game menu, that's not going to work. Settings are. This we'll have to play with when we actually start firing up some of the games here, but you have all these different image filters. You can turn the scan lines on, which is kind of cool for certain games. You can change the aspect ratio. Normal is going to be a 4:3. You can zoom in to 16:9 or crop even further. Overscan cuts out the overabundance of pixels that were on the edge, like blue borders and stuff like that. Force original resolution, I guess that'll put the game to its original resolution, at least that's what I was reading in the manual. Screen refresh rate, depending on 50 or 60 hertz, if it's PAL or NTSC, I believe. Screen size, that's the same option, I believe, that you use when you first start up the system. There is some sound enhancement stuff. I have it on, I think it's on by default. A lot of people complain about sound issues on clone systems. From what I've played so far, it's been pretty accurate. Bass boost if you want to do all that stuff. GUI sound effects, basically when you're moving stuff on the menu, it'll make a little effect. I found them a little loud and obnoxious, so I turned it off. And you can actually adjust the volume output of the system itself. And this thing puts out pretty loud. I will say some of my normal consoles, when they're plugged straight through and I'm doing video capture stuff, they are kind of quiet and I have to normalize the audio. This I actually had to crank down on XSplit halfway just so it wouldn't take over my voice. So if you're looking for a nice loud system to live stream with right from the get-go without any kind of external mixer, this is a good system to use. Now there's so much stuff you can do with managing the Retron controller itself. You can pair another controller. I think you can pair up to 4 if I remember correctly, maybe more than that. You can use shortcut buttons to do whatever you need it to do. The controller will turn off in 5 minutes. You can power off all connected controllers. Controller mapping, so you can actually define what controller is what for what system if you're doing 4-player games. Button mapping, what system you're playing. You can change the profile to whatever you want. Hotkey configuration. Now, I was messing around a little bit with this, and I was trying to set one of the buttons here for a screenshot, and it wasn't actually working. And then I found out the left extra button on the controller was taking screenshots. So not too sure about that. Console region, auto. USA, Europe, Japan, auto. Just leave it to auto. Pretty much all of this is very self-explanatory. Auto load last save state. You can have the cartridge start up as soon as it's inserted, loads in, automatically import saves on first run. You can change this to the SD card or internal storage. There's a file manager, system information, write firmware request to SD. I haven't messed too much with this. I hear there's going to be a day 1 update for this thing. Day 1 isn't technically till June 6th, so I do not have a firmware update available for this to try out. And I also don't have access to the cheat database, but I didn't do much looking because I didn't have a lot of time. But I will not be able to show you guys the cheat database function because it's not included with the system. It actually has to be loaded on an SD card. That is not included. All right, well, that's pretty much the majority of the stuff from both a physical perspective and then the internals as far as the software. Let's go ahead and load up a game, shall we? And we're going to start with an NES game. I'm actually going to pop in Ninja Gaiden. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll just switch back to the interface here. So I'm going to go ahead and plug the cartridge into the NES slot. And as you can see, it's loading on the top, and it's identified it as Ninja Gaiden. And if I had the cheat database and everything loaded in, I could actually go into the game menu and define a whole bunch of stuff. Why don't we stop in there real quick? But you can do cheats. If this had a save battery and you had save games on there, you can actually copy it to the system, or you can copy save to the cart. Now this I think is really awesome. say for example, I'm upstairs, I'm playing on my original hardware, and I want to go ahead and save my game, and I want to take this downstairs. My wife likes to watch me play video games, but I don't want to drag or have to worry about starting a game over because my save won't, carry over to the battery or something like that, just for example. So I can copy this to the Retron, or if I play on the Retron, start a new save, and I want to go upstairs and play, that's probably a better example. I can actually copy the save to the card itself. I haven't used the feature yet, so I don't know how successful it is, but it's a cool feature. I mean, just being able to play a game downstairs, do what I need to do, and say Minnie wants to watch the weather or something like that, she's tired of me watching playing video games, then I can just save my game, copy the save to the cart, and take the cart upstairs, pop it in my original hardware, and be good to go. And if you haven't gotten it by now, this system is going to be sitting in my family room. That's kind of my main point. HD TV down there. Don't need a HD upscaler for that. All that good stuff. This is what you see when you go into the cheat database. Not found on the SD card. So you could probably make your own XML, but whatever.